Our good buddy Jon Wilner is back, and again, he appears to be throwing a little bit of shade at the Big 12 in a recent article. But don't worry, because I'm here to debunk what Mr. Wilner has to say, and I have some data of my own to back it up. And we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you that data right after this word from our sponsor.
Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you.
What is up? Welcome in. Make yourself comfortable. Belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out another shot of top shelf college football content. On tap at Couz's Corner today, we are talking about the Big 12, and did they in fact get more than they deserve in the latest college football playoff revenue distribution? Mr. Jon Wilner seems to think so. But Mr. Wilner, I think you're wrong, and I'm here to prove it. Now, this article is behind a paywall, so I'm not going to read it to you and share the whole thing with you. I will leave a link to it, though, in the description box if you want to go check it out for yourself. But what I will do is go over a few of the highlights in the article, the main points Jon was making, and then I will give you some data of my own and also some data that was provided by another fellow Big 12 person, Mr. Jeff Fuller, who I've had on the show before, who's a BYU fan. And then I'm going to show you a spreadsheet I put together with some data that backs up what I and Mr. Fuller are trying to convey and why Mr. Wilner, I think, is barking up the wrong tree here. Now, Mr. Wilner's a great writer. Jon Wilner's a great writer. Fantastic writer. One of the best out there. But he's also very pro Pac-12, and in this case, anti-Big 12. And we saw some of that back when the Big 12 was kind of trying to get the four-corner schools and all that was going on. And Wilner was pretty anti-Big 12 in a lot of his writing. Well, he's back to some anti-Big 12 stuff today. So let's dig into it. When you look at what Mr. Wilner had to say in his article, the article basically centers around the college football playoff revenue model that was just announced a few weeks ago in several articles, but the one mostly used, in my opinion, was, and the best one was the one by Mr. Ross Dellinger. Now, we all know the CFP revenue model, it gives 59% of the college football playoff revenue money to the Big Ten and the SEC. They're walking away smelling like a rose. 59% combined revenue to those two conferences, while the ACC and Big 12 are having to share a combined 32% of the revenue, and then obviously the rest is split between the group of fives and the independents. Now, according to Jon in this article, the ACC and Big 12 are sort of being forced to be necessary partners, and he uses the word bedfellows, strange bedfellows in there, and he used a very interesting quote. He said, "They are forced to grab the hind legs of the CFP cash cow and hold on together for dear life," end quote. Now, that's a really good quote. I like that quote. Very good metaphor. For those of you who watch my show, I like metaphors. I use a lot of metaphors. Great metaphor there from Jon Wilner. And he's right there on that. He's totally accurate. However, in the rest of the article, he goes on to talk about how he feels like the ACC was actually shorted on the percentage of the revenue money they are being given. Of that 32%, the ACC is getting 17%, while the Big 12 is getting 15%. And Wilner thinks that that's not a big enough gap. He thinks the ACC, based on the criteria he's saying they used to determine the gap between the SEC, Big 10, and the other two, he thinks the ACC should be getting a lot higher percentage than the Big 12. He's claiming that when you look at the top brands in the ACC, when you look at realignment, if they did a realignment draft, he says the ACC would have the top 4 brands, maybe even top 5 if you count Miami. And I'm not saying Jon's wrong on that. Maybe he's right. When you look at Florida State, Clemson especially, top 2 brands, no doubt about it. North Carolina, no doubt about it. The most highly coveted brand out there in realignment, many say. out of the ACC, or out of the remaining schools that aren't already in those two leagues, the Power 2. And he even throws UVA in there. And then, of course, he says he thinks Miami could even be considered the 5th. And maybe that's accurate, but that's not the point, John. College football playoff is not based on realignment. There's a lot more that goes into realignment than market value and media value. They look at academics and all this other minutia that, let's be honest, TV networks probably don't give a flip about, okay? And at the end of the day, the college football playoff came down to TV revenue. It came down to who earned a higher percentage of the pay. And yes, one of the things they looked at was bursts into the college football playoff over the past 10 years. And Wilner's right here. The ACC has gotten a lot more bursts in the college football playoff than the Big 12. If you look at the conferences going forward, the way they're constituted, you've got to give the SEC credit for Oklahoma and Texas. You give Big 10 credit for Washington and Oregon. You give Big 12 credit for Cincinnati. If you do that, the Big 10 and SEC have had many, many more teams in, so they get a bigger share of the revenue. Well, the ACC's had 7 teams in because Clemson's been in 6 times and won a couple national titles. And Florida State's been in once since the playoff era started. That's 7 appearances. Where the Big 12's only had 2. TCU got in a couple years ago, and Cincinnati got in back in 2021. So that's 2 teams, 2 appearances. That's fair, John. But let's look at this thing holistically. Number one, I'm sure they look at more than just the number of appearances. They may have looked at the number of teams that have gotten in. Now, look, obviously, I don't know that. I wasn't in the room, but neither was Jon Wilner. And if you look at the number of teams that got in, ACC's had 2 teams in, Clemson and Florida State. Again, extremely top-heavy. Big 12's had Cincinnati and TCU get in. But the Big 12's not top-heavy. The Big 12 is a very competitive league with a lot of parity and a lot of competitive football games. And oh, by the way, if TV viewership comes into play here, which it probably does, and brand value comes into play here, which it probably does, at least to a degree, I think the Big 12 can stand up to the ACC and is right there on par, especially if you look at TV viewership. Now, I'm going to do a screen share here with you, first of all, of Mr. Jeff Fuller, who is a friend of the show. He's been on the show before. But Mr. Fuller put this out on Twitter the other day. He says, very well written article by Wilner that sadly misses the clear and obvious, quote, other side, that the new ACC has more of the weakest football fan bases than the rest of the Big 10, SEC, Big 12 combined. Now, Jeff here's referring to the value of having passionate fans. Passionate fans will tune in to watch games. Passionate fans will show up to games. Passionate fans will buy merch, all of that stuff. They'll be active on social media, those kind of things that add value. While there are indeed 3 to 4 brands that outpace anyone in the Big 12, there's also Wake Forest, SMU, Boston College, Syracuse, Stanford, Cal, and Georgia Tech, all of which have an argument of being bottom 10 among remaining P4 football brands and fans, compared to only 1 or 2 in the Big 12. Now, he goes on to talk about some other things that aren't really relevant to the video, and then he finishes out by saying this. The Big 12 is getting roughly the same money as the ACC, not because of some slick dealing by Yormark, which is what Wilner basically tried to say in his article, that he was trying to give Brett Yormark, being this great negotiator, all the credit. And look, Yormark is a great negotiator. I admit that. Brett Yormark has been a breath of fresh air for the Big 12. He's been a great commissioner so far. He's been knocking it out of the park in a lot of areas. But you have to look, in my opinion, at the brand of the league as a whole and not just how great our commissioner is. And I think Jon Wilner is really undervaluing the Big 12, in my opinion, and underselling the Big 12 here and overselling the ACC. But Fuller goes on to say, not because of the slick dealing by Yormark, but because it is chock full of solid brands and fan bases who care. Now I'm going to share with you the spreadsheet I put together comparing TV viewership of the ACC versus TV viewership in the Big 12 from 2015 through 2023. Now, the COVID year has been removed. Now, for this exercise, I used Run It Back with Zach, which is a writer named Zach Miller over on Medium who tracks TV viewership in college football. Now, these are not perfect numbers. There are flaws in these numbers. For example, any game that is not included in Nielsen ratings that doesn't get rated, he counts it as a 0, which can drop an average way down. So take that in mind. But when you look at this over the course of time, it still gives you a fair assessment of what teams bring in the most TV ratings. So let's share this spreadsheet right now. And when you look at this, obviously the teams in red are Big 12 teams. The teams in blue are ACC teams. Obviously, TV viewership, I've broken it out. 2015 to 2019 is in the first column. 2021, again, we skipped the COVID year. We have 2022, 2023, and then an average of all of them over here on the far right. And then I have sorted them in descending order from largest TV viewership down to lowest TV viewership based on that average. And obviously, no surprise. Florida State Clemson right there at the top, averaging 2.27 or 2.28, you could say, million per week for Florida State and 2.175 million per week for Clemson. Then you see a big drop down to the next team, which is, lo and behold, a Big 12 team, Oklahoma State at 1.5 million. As a matter of fact, the next 4 teams, so teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 on this list are all expansion Big 12 teams of Oklahoma State, TCU, Colorado, and Utah. Now, Colorado was extremely helped, or got a lot of help from the Deion Sanders effect in 2023. As you can see here, their numbers jumped from 0.61, 0.37, 0.35, all the way up to 4.5 million in 2023. They were one of the most watched teams. But again, there are numbers skewed for everywhere. TCU had a game against Ohio State during this time period. That skews the numbers. A lot of the ACC teams get to play games against Notre Dame, who's always a top 10 viewed team in college football. That skews their numbers. You know, some of the Big 12 teams might have played, you know, other big non-conference games that may skew the numbers. There's a lot of things in these numbers for everybody, really, that can skew them. So this is really the most fair way, in my opinion, to do a comparison. But what I want to point out here is once you get outside of Florida State and Clemson, who is there in the ACC that moves the needle? Yes, you can say UNC is a valuable brand, but again, it doesn't show in TV viewership. UNC is all the way down here, 14th on the list, behind Stanford, Louisville, BYU, West Virginia, Iowa State, Baylor. A lot of these teams that are ahead of UNC in TV viewership. As a matter of fact, out of all these years, UNC's only exceeded 1 million on average one time, and that was in 2021. All the way down, as you see, very balanced, but you see a lot of ACC teams here near the bottom. UVA, Duke, Wake Forest, Boston College, SMU, all near the bottom. Now, you do have Arizona and Houston sandwiched in there, but my gosh, when you look at the bottom half, it's mostly ACC teams. Look at all that blue. Look at all that blue in the bottom half. So, in matter of fact, I broke it down even further for you. ACC average viewership per week, 970,000. Big 12 average, 950,000. And that includes Florida State and Clemson. Now, if you take Florida State and Clemson out of the mix, Big 12 has a massive advantage. That 950,000 remains. ACC average drops all the way down to 760,000 viewers per week. Now, again, this is only games that are on networks where they track Nielsen ratings. So ESPN Plus, streaming services, stuff like that may not be included in a lot of these numbers. But again, it still gives you a good idea. Now, that also may tell you why Brett Yormark wanted that look-in clause in 2028, or if realignment happens. Because if Florida and Clemson leave, the value of the Big 12 is going to take a huge jump above the ACC, in my opinion, especially if the Big 12 is able to get a couple of teams in each year to the college football playoff. Let's hope that happens. Big 12, you need to perform well on the football field the next few years to prove to these anti-Big 12 people out there that we are a good conference. When you look at TV value, I don't think there's any way you can say that the ACC outpaces the Big 12 in any stretch of the imagination, especially once you get past Florida State and Clemson. I really don't. I mean, Florida State and Clemson is carrying that conference, whereas the Big 12 don't really have anybody carrying the conference. Again, Oklahoma State's the highest at 1.5 million. Big 12 is just a much more balanced conference, much more competitive conference. There's a lot of parity in the conference, and that brings, and let's not forget how passionate our fan bases are. Fan bases in Wake Forest, not that passionate. Boston, not that passionate. Even Pitt at times, their fans at times are not passionate. And I was surprised to see how low Virginia Tech is on these TV viewership numbers. Their fans just don't tune in to games. They attend games now. Their stadium stays full. Enter Sandman's rocking before games, but from a TV viewership perspective, they don't really move the needle. Now, if they start winning consistently, that can change. But one thing you see with the Big 12, even when teams in the Big 12 are not winning as much, they still have pretty consistent viewership numbers because our fans give a damn. What do you think? I want you to let me know in the comment section. Do you think that Jon Wilner is full of crap and just trying to throw shade at the Big 12, or do you think he has a point, and do you think the ACC should have gotten a bigger piece of the CFP revenue money? I want to hear your thoughts, and do you think that the Big 12 should be thanking their lucky stars that Brett Yormark got them what he did? I want to hear your opinion in the comments. Just simple say, hey, Big 12 got more than they deserved, or ACC didn't get enough, whatever you think. I want to hear it. I want to give a shout out right now to today's VIP member shout outs of the day. And I want to give a shout out today to two brand new VIP members. They are Dane the Surveyor and Terry Alford. Thank you both for joining and becoming paid members of Couz's Corner. If you want to become a paid member, all you have to do is hit the join button below. If you don't see a join button, simply go to my channel page on YouTube, my homepage. There will be a join button right beside my photo. Click it. It'll show you the 2 levels available, show you the perks that come with each level. I'm adding perks to that. I'm now adding 1-minute shorts that are available only to channel members. I'm also going to be doing a lot more members-only content that will be behind that paywall for a couple of weeks. Going to be doing some more of that going forward. Don't miss out on that. Become a channel member today. Also, you can support my channel by checking out my merch store. Through April 6th, you get 20% off all of my merch, whether it's hoodies, ball caps, T-shirts, tank tops, beanies, coffee mugs, whatever. Go check it out. I have several designs to choose from. 20% off. And if you're a club level member, which is level 2, there's a special link I provide to you in the community tab for even a steeper discount for that merch. So go check it out today. Link is in the description. I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. Check out another conference realignment video right here. Have a top shelf day in Q, country, roads.